Welcome to NAESP HQ and this podcast video series from NAESP headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia, highlighting noteworthy stories for pre-K-8 school leaders. I'm NAESP Executive Director Earl Franks, and in this episode, we'll provide an update on NAESP's advocacy work with Danny Carlson, NAESP's Associate Executive Director of Policy and Advocacy. Danny, thanks for joining me, and let's start with talking about the CARES Act, which Congress passed recently.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, so the CARES Act was a $2 trillion bill that Congress passed at the end of March. This was a broader sort of coronavirus response package. Included in that, that legislation, though, were two pots of funding that impact K-12 schools. So one is the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, or they're calling the GEAR Fund. So this is a $3 billion pot of funds that's going to governors, and they can use for the purposes of higher ed or for K-12. And then there's a larger pot that is a sort of a K-12 specific fund. That's a $13 billion fund. And that one is going to go to districts for the purposes of coronavirus response. And so both of those are kind of working their way down. The governor's fund is a little bit further along, and so most governors have received those funds. And in the coming weeks, LEAs and superintendents and sort of at the local level, they'll be receiving their pots of funds.
Talk a little bit about NAESP's Advocacy Action Plan that was developed, this campaign around the GEAR Fund, encouraging principals to urge their governor to prioritize K-12 schools with these funds.
Yeah, good question. I think kind of just even bigger picture, I'll talk about that in one second, but I mean, I think kind of the bigger picture right now is the reality is that this is a pretty perilous juncture right now for schools. Not only in the coming weeks and months, but in the next couple of years. What happens with these federal funds, I think, is going to have a huge impact on schools and students. And so we always talk about the principal voice and making their voice heard, but we're talking about tens of billions of dollars at stake. Decisions about where this money will go, which schools will receive it, and how students will be served. And so, big challenges ahead with state and local budgets, and things like, staving off layoffs and providing services and potential cuts. And so the principal voice really, really matters right now. So we started, NAESP, we started an advocacy alert to urge NAESP members to reach out to their governor's office and ask that that $3 billion pot of funding, that governors have at their discretion, that principals speak up and make their voice heard and ask that funds be prioritized for K-12 schools. Principals are on the front lines of this pandemic. They're seeing every day what's happening with their staff and schools and students, and so they know really what is needed at this time.
How can principals who are listening to this take action and contact their governor if they're interested in advocating for prioritizing K-12 schools with the GEAR Fund?
Yeah, so on our website, on NAESP.org's website, if you click on the Advocacy tab, we have an Advocacy Action Center link. And in that link, if you click on that, that takes you to a page with all of our active campaigns. And this is one of them. This is the one on the top, and this is the one that is specific to reaching out to your governor for this purpose.
Let's shift and talk a little bit more specifically about the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund and how that's going to be dispersed and the possible timing on that.
Yeah, so again, this is both of these two pots of funding that we're talking about are both as a result of the CARES Act. Again, that stimulus that Congress passed at the end of March. The governor's fund is the $3 billion. This is now a $13 billion fund, and that is being distributed to states, to their state education agencies via Title I formula. State education agencies then turn around and distribute 90% of those funds also on their Title I formula. So the way to sort of think about how much schools should receive through this funding is to think about what schools currently receive with their Title I funding, and kind of the rough math on it is to multiply that amount times 84%. So that an 84% increase in terms of what they currently get. So it's a sizable chunk. In terms of where we are with that, those funds are starting to make their way down to SEAs. The state education agencies had to apply to the Department of Education, and then the Department of Education obligates those funds to the state education agency. So I would expect here, starting really in mid-May, going through the end of May and early June, the local education agencies, superintendents, really should start receiving those funds at that time.
What are NAESP's plans in terms of action plans to help principals with resources that will assist them in advocating to their district on why these ESSER funds are needed at the school level?
Yeah, so just as I was talking about how it's important for principals to make their voice heard to their governor about why those funds are needed, same thing, for these. These funds are, the requirements in the law are that these funds go down to the district level, again, based on that Title I funding. But after that, there's quite a bit of autonomy in terms of how those funds are used and sort of what qualifies as coronavirus response. But again, this is a huge opportunity for principals to step up, engage with their central office and their superintendents, and start those conversations now about why those funds are needed at the school level, and start thinking about and talking about those conversations about what are the things that are actually needed now in the coming months and even over into the next year. And so NAESP is working on some tools and some resources that we're going to push out to all members with some helpful tips and strategies around how to have those conversations. We really think that it's a great opportunity to have create that strong partnership with your district, and really ultimately about this is about responding to a pandemic, and really ensuring that students and staff are safe and healthy, and sort of moving forward. There's great learning opportunities for all students.
And lastly, tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about the coronavirus funding and policy tracker that the NAESP advocacy team has created.
Yeah, so this is another in sort of all of the moving parts as it relates to federal response and action to the coronavirus pandemic. The NAESP advocacy team has created a policy and funding tracker, just to keep track of all the various bills and iterations of these bills, the various provisions that are included in them, the funding levels, the funding formulas. We have that available on our advocacy pages as well, and that is to help folks sort of understand and sort of keep track of all of these things they're hearing in the news. You'll hear about a coronavirus response package and, well, what was in there for education? And so we have that all in one place. In addition, we have the state allocation amounts for each of these pieces of bills. So that governor's fund, you can see in your state how much your state is going to get for that. And then this ESSER fund, that K-12 pot, you can see how much your state will be receiving through that.
Thanks, Danny. I'm going to give you the last word. Any final comments you have?
Yeah, thanks. I think just want to reiterate the principal's voice. We always talk about the importance of it. There was a recent survey of Pew and talked about the most trusted leaders in society, and the principal was #1 above military leaders and faith leaders. So this is the principal voice always matters, but this is a real opportunity to, I think, of stand on top of your desk, not literally, figuratively, and really talk about, really let folks know about why funding is needed at this time for schools, for your staff, and ultimately for your students.
Thanks, Danny, for joining us, and we'll keep you updated, our listeners and viewers, regarding anything advocacy policy related to going on here in Washington, D.C. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of NAESP HQ. Until next time, I'm Earl Franks. Thanks for listening.